Welcome to Small Business, Big Network, the podcast for small business owners who want big results from their networking. I'm Liz Drury, a freelance voiceover artist who knows that if you're not working, then networking could help. Alexis Kingsbury is a multiple business owner who strives to have a really great work-life balance. For him, networking is about connections, not sales. And he says that some of his greatest leaps forward in business have been thanks to his network. Thank you very much for joining me on the podcast today, Alexis.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, Liz.
Now, you're an award-winning entrepreneur with 3 businesses currently, I think. Have you always wanted to be a business owner?
I think I have, I think embarrassingly, like back when I was a child, I think I always had this idea that I wanted to be this business owner entrepreneur. In fact, I think I even had the vision of bigger than Branson back when I was like 12, 13, which I cringe at now. So I think I always was. And when I was around that age, I was washing cars, sweeping drives, creating newsletters and selling them and so on, all in a bid to try and create businesses that could grow, albeit that I could never work out to scale them at the time. So it was always got stuck with just me.
And what was it, do you think, that attracted you to that sort of entrepreneurship?
I think there's a few things. I think fundamentally I like building stuff. If I go back even younger, I was always one for collecting toilet roll tubes and lemonade bottles and strapping them together and creating like a rocket and doing all those sorts of things and building my own tree house. So I loved building things, and I loved the idea of being able to build a business that could have a huge impact around the world. So I think that was kind of got me started, and I did like the fact that it allowed me to kind of earn some money that was different to just a standard job. I did a paper round, and that got me like £13 a week. Mm-hmm. And I remember one particular Christmas, there was a deal that the local paper did where for every new subscription I could sell, I got like another amount of money. And I thought, this is fantastic. This is great. And so I literally went door to door selling this subscription to around the village. And I think I doubled the paper round and made a load of money and thought, this is fantastic. And then, of course, the very following week, I've now got to deliver twice as many papers and didn't get paid any more. And I thought, oh, hang on. So I knew that perhaps being an employed person was not always going to jar with me slightly, perhaps in the long term.
So what has your career journey been sort of from leaving school? Have you always worked for yourself, or have you been employed too?
I've been employed multiple times, and actually it turns out I'm a good employee from the employer's perspective, typically because very early on I like to find out what is it that good or great looks like. What are you going to score me on the basis of, and let me optimize for that. And I've worked at a garden centre. I worked for DHL for a while, initially helping them on the kind of IT support side, and then going into performance management and coaching and training and all sorts of different areas there. When I finished university, I went and became management consulting at PA Consulting, where I was working with large organisations like Honda and AstraZeneca and UK government and so on, essentially helping them solve their biggest problems and seeing how they worked at scale, which turns out it's people and processes, which neither did I put in place back when I was washing cars and selling headsets and all these sorts of things. So no, I have had multiple jobs, but in many ways, in between all of those, I was always starting little businesses along the side.
Yeah. And so although you sort of knew from an early age that you wanted to be self-employed, did you know what kind of field you ultimately wanted to work in?
Not really, no. I think when I was probably about sort of 15, I started doing some of the online type business area, and I found that really fascinating. The first thing I did was create a PlayStation fan site where I found that I could get paid just for having banners on the website. That was back when you could get paid for impressions rather than clicks. And so I thought it was amazing that essentially as a child, I could get a $75 check for creating a website about something I loved. And so, yeah, so I think I probably did think that at some point I would build big online businesses. And so I then went into, when I was at uni, I was selling headsets. I was building and selling computers and providing support on things like Wi-Fi. And so, it always felt like it was going to be technology focused. That was always something that I really, really enjoyed.
Yeah. Now, tell me about Parentpreneur. It's a business that you no longer run, but it does still exist, doesn't it?
That's right, yeah. So that was the result of I was asked to speak at some events on how to set up a business, and those events were particularly targeted at mainly mumpreneurs but a few dadpreneurs as well. So people who are typically got young children and are looking to start businesses, and they don't want to spend all the hours in their week and loads of savings trying to make a business succeed at the expense of their families.
Yeah.
And that was an experience that I had building my businesses whilst also raising two small children. And so I spoke at some events. It went down really well. I got asked, can you provide coaching and further support? And at the time, I was already running two other businesses. So I said, not directly, but give me some time. And I created the Parentpreneur Accelerator, which was a podcast plus online coaching program that was then able to kind of serve. I think we ended up working with about 50 different startup owners who were helping them to either make their business successful or fail it quickly without spending a lot of time or money, whilst getting to spend time with the people that they love. And so that was something that we set up for a while, ran that. Then when COVID hit, I really needed to focus on my other businesses, and so I kind of paused a lot of the work I was doing there. But then, met someone then a few months or a year later who was looking to do something in that area, and it felt like a really, really good fit. So with Michael Kittinger, who's now bought that business and is now running it himself, and picking up the baton and running with it.
Brilliant. So in 2010, you started up two businesses, Bridging Insight and Spidergap. Tell me about those and what those businesses do.
Yeah, so when I stopped being a management consultant and handed in my notice and started a business with my co-founder Paddy, the first business was Bridging Insight, and that was essentially us being consultants to large businesses. So we had clients like IMI PLC and AstraZeneca and Sony, and we're working with them to kind of help them improve collaboration and improve ways of working. But the aim was always that in the background we would try and find a problem that we could solve using technology. And so the idea was to create a software, some kind of software business. So we iterated in lots of different things and eventually ended up with Spidergap after lots of very quick failures or ideas that we pursued and then killed nice and early. But Spidergap was really kind of started to get some traction, and but we did have to pivot a lot until we really found our focus, and both in terms of our purpose of Spidergap and our big why, which centered around our love for personal development, both of ourselves but also of other employees and team members, and wanting to really support other organizations with doing a great job of that and making that easy and making that continuous. And so that's why we sort of more and more focused on Spidergap, and it became a 360-degree feedback tool. Initially, it started much broader than that, but we got really focused, and as a result became the top-rated 360-degree feedback tool globally, now used by over 550 organizations around the world, including companies like 3M and PwC, Swarovski, Pepsi, and so on.
Wow, fantastic. Now, your most recent business is AirManual. What does this one do?
Yeah, so another software business, although we do have some consultants in the team that support our clients in getting the benefits from what they do. And that is a business that was born out of a challenge that we were having in Spidergap, where as we were growing the team, we were finding that Paddy and I were stuck in the business. We were really sort of struggling to free up our time. We started to document processes and guidance and onboarding and training and so on, hand it over to the teams, but it was clunky. It was hard for them to follow and find. They found it difficult to update or create their own, and so we were kind of really stuck, if often in the day to day, but certainly in the week to week. And what we realized is what we need is a really easy tool to use that brings everything together, all the, how you run the business all in one place, so that you don't just have piles of Word documents and PowerPoint files all over the place. Bring it all into one place, make it really easy and interactive to follow, and make it really quick to make changes, so that if someone's halfway through a process, like, I don't know, doing your R&D tax claim or whatever, and you go and you realize, oh, there's a step missing here, or we shouldn't do it like that. You want the employee to be able to quickly make a change and not have to make a note that, oh yes, I'll come back maybe in a week or two and try and remember to make that improvement. So we really had out of that problem that we faced in our own business, we decided that we'd create AirManual. And so AirManual now is a tool for documenting processes and onboarding and all your policies and so on, in documents that are really sort of interactive, easy to use, easy to update. And what's been amazing is that when we first showed it to other business owners, they said, oh, this is fantastic. I totally need this in my business. Can you give me access? And we would sign them up, set them up. And then 2 weeks later, they've done nothing. And it was so frustrating because, of course, we'd look at the tool and go, but the tool's like so easy to use. It's like, some people have described it like, oh, it's like Power Word, but easier to use. Like, and you just go, why isn't this immediate? And I think what we came to realize through speaking to those business owners is that sometimes, although it's counterintuitive, you just struggle to make the time to free up time.
Yeah.
And you struggle to make the time to put systems in place to reduce mistakes that end up taking you hours and hours and hours, and that, tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of pounds. And yet we just don't carve that time out. And so what we started doing was these sort of done with you calls, initially with me and now with consultants on our team, to get that time with the business owner and their leadership team to actually implement some of this stuff. And what's been amazing, I liken it a bit to like having a personal trainer. In theory, we all know how to lose weight and be fit, and look like gods, right? And yet, how many of us do it? Yeah. Whereas if you've got a regular appointment with a friend or a personal trainer every Saturday morning, you're much more likely to succeed.
Yeah.
And so we found that by having a consultant on our team that supports those business owners through a few series of calls, then we could achieve amazing results. And what was fantastic for me to see was that, back when I was a management consultant working with companies, 15 years ago, it was expensive for them. They were paying thousands of pounds per day, and the team of us would be there for months, like full time. And yet fast track 15 years to what we're doing with AirManual, and we're able in 3 hours of spending time between a business owner and one consultant to save a business owner 15 hours per week. And it just, the results that you get are phenomenal. Like that, and that's a real example based on one particular business owner who I spoke to him, and he said, I'm working 60 hours a week. I've got no time. I've not even got time to think about how to free up my time. He said that, I've got one particular process that's taking me 3 hours per day, and I know I need to document it and hand it over to someone else, but I've just not made the time to do it. And I suspect it'd take me about 8 hours. And I said on the call, I said, well, we've got 45 minutes left. Let's see what we can do. And we got the entire process documented in 45 minutes. And then in a subsequent call, got it handed over to his team. And the amazing thing was that not only did it save him 15 hours per week, but that particular process was doing price quotes for customers. So a customer would ask for a quote and they'd give the pricing. And he said that the biggest impact was that previously it was taking him 2 to 3 days to respond to those requests for quotes. And instead now his team were able to respond in an hour, which of course, you imagine that you contact 2 printing companies and one comes back in an hour and one comes back in 3 days. like immaterial of price. Which one are you going to go with?
Yeah,
Like,
quite. Yeah, yeah.
and so it's those kind of incredible results that you can get when you invest the time in this area, but often it's so hard to do so, right? Just because you're so caught up in the day to day.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure that's true of lots and lots of businesses. And sometimes it's having that accountability element as well, isn't it? If you know you've got a call with somebody, you better have done what you said you were going to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, we often say that even if you're, even if you're kind of doing it yourself, if you like, with our tool and with the guides we provide, we recommend just having a check-in with someone, like ideally in our team, but someone that just to make sure that you're
Yeah.
making that progress and investing it, because it is incredible. Like, as long as you put in, an hour a week, the time savings that you can get back is phenomenal. And ultimately, as a business owner, like, your responsibility is basically work out what works, like find what product sells really well, or what marketing channel works well for you, or what sales pitch, or what price. Find out what works, and then turn that into something that can be delegated to someone else and repeated.
Yeah.
And then that frees you up with time. That means you can work out what works in some other area,
Yeah.
another marketing channel, or whatever. And the problem is that so many business owners, including myself, like particularly back in those days, like 13, 14, 15, remember how I would I was doing car washing and so on, and I'd end up so busy with washing all the cars I didn't have time to get any other clients.
Yeah.
And of course, if I'd been smarter, or if I had listened to this podcast back then, what I'd have done is say, well, hang on, I know how to wash the cars. That's the easy bit. Like, let me now turn that into some training. Let me find some people that can do that, and that'll free me up to go and sell more opportunities to wash the cars every week. And if I had done that, like, I'd have been able to scale the business. And so that's ultimately that's the responsibility of the business owner, is to keep on playing that game, keep on switching between find out what works and then systemize and scale it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this is something you've already sort of touched on before, but I know you're very keen on your work-family balance. And in fact, the last time you and I spoke to each other, you were on a massive road trip with your family throughout the summer. So tell me how that went. Where did you go? How did it work? How did the kids get on? Just tell me all about it.
Oh, it was incredible. So with my wife and two kids aged 6 and 8, over the summer holidays, we rented a motorhome and drove down through England, over on the Eurotunnel, down through France, stopping at various places on the way, theme parks and water parks for the kids. We visited the chateaus and went through the Loire Valley, and then down and stayed for about a week in the Dordogne, across to Rocamadour and down to Carcassonne, and then down eventually down to Spain and through the Bay of Roses, Barcelona, and then across to the La Rioja region before getting the ferry back from Santander back to the UK. And so all in all, that was 6 weeks together in that motorhome. We absolutely loved it. Of course, we were worried that we'd be fed up of each other. And yet it didn't happen. It was, if anything, it brought us so much closer. It was so nice to do that. And so, and it was just, the amazing experiences, both for us, but also for the kids, were just phenomenal and priceless. And it's a whole day of a lifetime, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the nice thing was, being able to be out of the business and not need to be available. So many business owners that I know and we've worked with, well, they'd struggle to be out of the business even a few days without having to be on the email and have phone calls and respond to text. And it was just nice that my amazing team were able to keep everything going, deal with all the issues, all while I'm gone. And so that's not to say I didn't do any work. I did, but it was work I wanted to do rather than needed to do.
Yeah.
For example, we're a globally remote team, so I happen to have a couple of team members who are based in Spain, and so I did meet up with them as part of the trip. One for dinner in Barcelona, and one for a few days while we were in Logroño and La Rioja, and it's like. But that's great fun. Like that's the kind of work you want to be doing as a business owner, rather than the stuff that you don't.
Yeah. And I guess that's all possible because of exactly what you've been talking about. You've got systems and processes that you've put in place that you can hand on to somebody else, and you don't need to be involved in it on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly right. Yeah, it means that firstly, I have systematically worked through all of the activities that I was doing in the business looking at, okay, what am I having to do every day? And then what am I having to do every week? And what am I having to do every month? And documenting them as a series of easy to follow checklists and handing them over to a team member and making it easy for them to see, here's all the processes that I need you to follow. Here's how frequently you need to follow them. Here's when they were last done. Here's therefore when the next need to be done. Hand it over. Here's the steps. And then they can follow it. And any questions they have, I go, oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, here's the answer. Okay, now please update the checklist.
Yeah.
And I never get asked that question again.
Yeah.
Even if I replace that staff member, because it's now in the guidance.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the big changes for us. When we started following that approach, we never repeated mistakes. We never got repeated questions. And initially, you don't get a huge amount of benefit, but that benefit quickly stacks. But in terms of the fast benefit I was getting was like, I remember bringing in the finance administrator, and within 2 days of her starting, and note that she had zero finance experience. Her background, she was a maths grad, but we handed over the checklist, and it meant that within 2 days she was saving me a day a week, and because she was then able to take that over, and then within 2 weeks she was saving me 2.5 days a week.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, and not just the time saved per week, but she was doing tasks that the business couldn't operate efficiently and effectively if they weren't done on a fairly regular basis. Paying your suppliers, paying your employees, doing payroll and processing invoices and chasing payments. All of those things, sure, you can skip for a few days, but if you skip for a few weeks, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And the nice thing is that all of that stuff just happens without me needing to be watching and observing. And it's not even just about the ability for someone to do that task, it's the ability for that to be managed easily.
Yeah.
There is a process dashboard that shows all of these processes and when they next need to be run, and are flagged if there's anything that's not done, which makes it easy for both the employee and the, in that case, finance team to see what needs doing and whether there are any balls getting dropped and so on.
Yeah.
So it makes it so relaxed by comparison. It removes all that stress, and it means that I'm also not leaving things like getting your confirmation statement done, or renewing your insurance, or remembering to do a pay review for an employee because it's their 1 year anniversary in the company. All those sorts of things that need doing, and it's pretty bad if they're not done, and the risk can be quite high, and the cost can be high. Just having the confidence that all those things happen in my absence, is hugely freeing.
So are you now planning another trip with the family?
Not yet. We're currently going through the process of purchasing a bit of a project in the form of a house. And so at the moment, it was quite funny because we booked all the 6-week trip before even contemplating the house purchase. And it's a good job that the purchase got delayed due to various factors, because otherwise we'd have been quite frustrated that we weren't getting to work on the house. But we're going to be doing quite significant things for that. So I can actually imagine us taking 6 weeks to do house stuff, doing gardening and building the extension and redecorating and so on, because my wife's a very talented designer as a sort of hobby rather than a job. And as a result, like, I can totally imagine us just as a family spending 6 months 6 weeks. Although maybe that Freudian slip of 6 months is perhaps that's the next challenge. But I can totally imagine us doing like a 6-week period where we just sort of really focus on that and work together to do some amazing stuff there. So maybe that next time. But I'm also up for other ideas of holidays and trips. I'd be very happy doing another trip across France and Spain. It's one of the things I learned over those 6 weeks, aside from the fact that my French is much better than my Spanish, is that there's a whole lot more we could have done in both places.
Yeah, plenty to see. So let's chat a bit about networking now then, and how you use networking as a tool for your businesses.
Yeah, so it's something that in the past I probably shied away from doing very consciously. I think that I always felt like networking was as a kind of icky thing that felt very salesy. And yet the reality is, when done right, is kind of the opposite. You know, I've been to so many networking events and seen such a variety of approaches, and actually the approach that I find works on me and others the least is what seems to be the most professional. Like someone who comes in with a really slick patter and a deck of business cards and, you know, seems to be really focused and da da da. Like they don't, the risk is that they don't create the rapport.
Yeah.
And actually, I've found that the most effective networking comes from going and meeting people, connecting with them personally, and seeing who you get on with, and finding those people that you've got that affinity. You know, when you feel like you're having that great conversation and you're sort of vibing off each other and going, oh yeah, and absolutely and totally aligned.
Yeah.
Those are the people that then can turn into collaboration opportunities. That said, well, and not just collaboration opportunities actually, but the one of the other things that I've seen is amazing is when you do kind of when you're at least able to explain what you do fairly coherently, and particularly when you're able to describe who you help and the results that you get, what I've seen is that other people can then be great, and it varies, like it's definitely a certain skill set, but there are some people that are then great at connecting you. You know, they're the ones that go and meet someone else and go, ooh, you've got this problem. Let me introduce you to Alexis. He helps you sort out your processes and be more efficient as a team, free up your time. You should have a chat. And then they follow up on that. And that's been amazing. There are a few people that I have met that do such an incredible job of that it just astounds me. And I feel bad that my brain often doesn't work like that. I'm not as good at immediately thinking, ooh, here's a person that I can connect you with. I think it's partly my consultant brain where I go more to let me help you come up with a solution rather than let me connect you, let me refer you to someone else. Perhaps because I'm trying to be helpful, and yet I'd probably be more helpful by connecting them to someone else. So I think that's one of the things I've seen with networking is by being friendly and being authentic and yourself, like you can create some really good connections. And then I think the key is not to expect results too quickly. I think if you're going there thinking, oh, I might pick up 3 or 4 sales, I think it's the mistake. And I certainly in the past I went to events kind of thinking, oh, maybe I'll try networking to get some sales. And I found that now whenever I go to those events, I just treat it in the same way as if I was going to a pub quiz with some friends. It's go and chat and, you know, ask what they do. What if there's someone that you've not met before, asking what do they do, and ask some interesting questions to dig, and then share a little bit about what you do, and then again connect on stuff that you both enjoy or are aligned on to do that. And I've found that then works better. I must admit, I don't do a lot of it in terms of going to networking events, partly because I'm very fortunate to have a great network of people who do proactively connect me as a result of doing a load of that. So it's one of those things that when after you've done it for a little while, it really does build up a kind of flywheel of results that that I've even had weeks where I go, oh, okay, wow, I seem to be talking to 15 new people this week in my calendar, which is fantastic, but doesn't make me immediately feel a need to jump out to a load of networking events in addition. So, but it does vary. Yeah.
I imagine you don't have a great deal of time to be going out to events, do you, with all these businesses that you run?
I don't know. I actually, that's probably where I do spend most of my time. I think because I've set up the team so that they're doing the running.
Yeah.
You know, even like for Spidergap, for example, the leadership team that we've set up there with their processes around how they do the 6 monthly and quarterly planning, which is literally going on while we're talking right now. That the rest of I joined that call before we started speaking, and then left them to it, and they're doing that. So a lot of the time I am actually going out and going to events, either presenting, running workshops, or learning myself and looking how I can sharpen the saw myself to get good results. So I'd probably spend most of my time at the events and masterminds rather than anything else.
And all of those, of course, are great opportunities for networking, even if it's not billed as as a networking meeting, aren't they?
Well, indeed, and so I suppose that's what it's funny when I think, oh, do I go to networking meetings? It's like, well, yes, I do, and then of course there are loads of events, whether it's mastermind meetings, etc., that are actually great opportunities for networking. And I think ultimately, if I think back to the best results I've had in my business, the biggest leap forwards have come from those connections. They've come from strategic partnerships. They've come from networks that I have built predominantly through some form of networking and referrals and conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. So just finally then, if listeners are interested in finding out more about you or the businesses that you run, Bridging Insight, Spidergap, AirManual, or anything else you might want to set up in the meantime, what's the best place for people to find you, Alexis?
Yeah, so I'm on most social media platforms, so particularly LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can find me. I'm Alexis Kingsbury. I'm the one that's male and co-founder of AirManual. And actually, that first description probably helps to filter quite a lot. The other thing I'd recommend is that if anyone's perhaps struggling with building business, freeing up their time, reducing mistakes, getting team members up to speed and performing well, I am running a webinar every Wednesday on that very topic, and people can find that by going to airmanual.co, and then at the top you can click on resources and you'll find various resources, including the webinar, but also some ebooks and things that people might find useful. And that's a free webinar that people can join and learn more about exactly how we've applied these structures in the business and how they can be used by other businesses to free up their time, reduce mistakes, get people up to speed faster.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for being my guest today, and best of luck with the house that you're renovating and planning your next trip, because I'm sure you're going to do that too.
Brilliant. Yeah. No, thank you very much. And I think you're probably right.
Thanks for listening to Small Business, Big Network. If you found this podcast useful, please do rate, review and subscribe. And don't forget to share it with the rest of your network too.